Hi everyone, today I am going to summarize a movie for you. The film starts with, before they weren't, Nick and Amy Dunn were the happiest couple they knew. In the center, the wealthy and attractive Amy disappears during their turbulent marriage, and all the evidence pointing to her husband Nick, who didn't appear to care. Nick, his spouse lying to him, gradually pulls at her hair. He considers breaking open her skull and delving into her mind to get the answers. How could she have known? What state was she in? How have they treated one another? Nick visits the bar, which he co-owns on the day of his 5th anniversary. Margot, his twin sister. He requests a tumbler of bourbon and then informs her in a nasty tone, "Which day is it?" Like Nick, Margot has never been a huge admirer of Amy, so she lacks enthusiasm. Concerning the anniversary, too. Previously, Amy had been writing about how content she was in her journal. At a gathering in New York, she ran upon the funny and endearing Nick, Yorkshire. Nick made an effort to persuade her that he is not only playing around with her. Amy isn't accept him when he says that his chin gives him an evil appearance. Nick answers by covering his chin before assuring her that he is sincere in their relationship. The two of them become plastered in sugar as they pass a bakery, and Nick informs her that unkissed is not a good way to weather a sugar storm. He mopped up a bit of the sugar, off her lips, and gave her a gentle kiss. Coming full circle, Margot asks Nick whether Amy will hold one more treasure hunt in honor of their anniversary. Given that most puzzles are about when Nick is unable to provide the solution, she becomes irate with him. Then he gets a call from his neighbor, alerting him to the presence of his cat outside their residence. This makes him want to return home and bring the cat inside. Nick phones Amy exclusively after getting home, to get a blank stare. He discovers their living room table overturned while searching for her, over with every piece of glass broken. Officer James and Detective Rhonda Boney met when Gilpin arrives. They get right to work on their inquiry, even if everything appears normal. Rhonda initially notices a little blood stain in the kitchen. She and James both mark it. Casts a wary glance at Nick. They next proceed through the poster to Amy's office. Rhonda learns there that Amy Elliott Dunn is the protagonist of the well-known children's Amazing Amy book. Amy's subsequent journal post detailed being wed. She was at her parents' celebration to commemorate the next installment with Nick. Amazing Amy was supposed to get married in the novel. Amy remarks, "I'm jealous and angry," on how the content of the book was really a polished reflection of her own shortcomings. In an encounter with a group of reporters, she clarifies that Amazing Amy was always one pace in front of her. Nick interrupted the interview to pop the question, much to her joy. Nick is taken to the police station in the present to be questioned. In spite of the city's drug and crime issues, his seeming indifference to his wife's absence, even letting out a few jokes. The more inquiries Nick fielded, the more obvious it seemed that he doesn't give his wife any thought. He has no idea what she does for a living, or whether she knows her blood type, or whether she has any pals. Rhonda becomes quite upset when she discovers Amy forces Nick to invite her parents after realizing he hasn't even given them a call, to tomorrow's press conference. Nick and Amy were again mentioned in a diary post, after 2 years of marriage. Unlike some, their marriage didn't feel like effort. They were joyful, claimed to do so. Nick was well versed in her. In response to her treasure hunt puzzle, he might use ease, and he even gave her the identical anniversary gift that she had given him. Rhonda had dispatched the forensic team to continue the inquiry by inspecting the Dunn family, dropping Nick off to spend the night at Margot's. Noelle was expecting. Rhonda introduces herself to Hawthorne as Amy's closest friend. Rhonda looks shocked. By this, and before entering the home, she consents to meet with her later. They locate there the first hint, a letter in Amy's drawer of panties that was actually labeled as League 1 Inch at the conference. Nick makes his appeal, for the assistance of the people in a cold and callous way. As the press descended on Rand and Nick is instructed to stand next to Amy's missing poster and grin when Marybeth asks him questions. He complies inertly. Following the news presentation, Rhonda queries Nick regarding the hint she discovered among Amy's possessions. Nick is aware of the riddle's solution, and he brings her to his teaching office at the school. Nick discovers the second there, clue as Rhonda notices some sultry undergarments. Nick seemed to be in some distress. He returns Rhonda's focus on the hint. A little is mentioned in the second. Brown House, which Nick says he's never heard of. Later on in the evening, Nick visits the home of his father. It has been abandoned since these days. His father lives in a nursing facility. There, he discovers the third clue, so he conceals it from Rhonda, the person he believes is pursuing him. When Nick gets in his vehicle, he reads the third clue, and he swears at his wife out of rage before slamming on the brakes. In her subsequent journal post, Amy detailed the economic downturn that resulted in the pair's unemployment. Nick was encouraged by Amy, but he became enraged when he learned that Amy had allowed her parents to steal the most of her trust money covertly from him. Even though he ultimately assured her that it was all right, he went on to exploit that occurrence as justification for his lavish expenditures. At the center of he was ready to have a fight with her when Margot called to tell him about their sick mother, and from Amy knew from that point on that things could only get worse. Amy wasn't sure whether Nick wanted her to relocate to Missouri with him once they moved together. In their new house, she felt disconnected and alienated, as though she could simply vanish. Nick visits Amy at the volunteer center 2 days after she vanishes. Elizabeth and even Officer James are put off by Nick's pleasant demeanor with the locals. With him, he was merely being as his mother had requested. A kind gentleman, yet to them he was acting as though nothing were amiss. Nick answers Rhonda's question on Noelle Hawthorne, claims he has no idea who she is. Then he notices Amy's ex-boyfriend, Desi Collings, and attempts to pursue him, but a lady stops her. She snaps a picture of him, and Nick asks her to remove it while forcing a false grin. She won't listen, and into her displeasure, turns away from him. For Nick, things start to get worse. Norma's team is unable to locate the allegedly costly purchases Nick made in their home, and Nick is under fire from the media for his happy-looking photographs. As he's beginning to relax in Margot's sofa, his student Andy pays him an unannounced visit. Between them, the two have been having an affair, and Andy even brings up Nick's vow to file for divorce from Amy. And he instructs her to never bring up the subject again, and with that, they share a bed. Amy made it quite evident in her diary that she and Nick were having a failing marriage. Amy didn't exist to him other than as a means of release, and he only ever exploited her for that. After Nick became enraged when it was implied that it could be time for them to have a child. Their dispute escalated more till it became violent. Nick shoved Amy firmly and yelled at her, making her head striking the stair post when she fell. Rhonda and James meet with a dealer called as they continue their inquiry into the disappearance of the girl, Jason, who can identify Amy's picture. It seems that she appeared there in desperation on Valentine's Day, requiring a little pistol she could carry with her. And he wasn't lying. Amy possesses a Valentine's. She said in her journal post for that day that she needed a gun. She thought Nick actually believed that her money was the only thing keeping him from getting rid of her. When Andy leaves the following morning, Margot loses it and attacks Nick. He makes an attempt. Tries explain his decisions by citing how awful Amy made him feel, but Margot is unwilling to listen to it. Rather, she demonstrates to Nick how much TV personality Ellen Abbott has already started to cry. Him distinct due to his strange and purportedly psychopathic actions in the face of his wife's loss of presence. Later that evening, there is a vigil for Amy. This time, Nick makes a stronger case for himself by expressing his love for his lovely spouse, which infuriates Andy. Nick is interrupted by Noelle, who insists that Nick inform everyone what he did to his spouse in pregnancy. The news of Amy's pregnancy surprises everyone. Nick feels compelled to depart from the vigil. When Rhonda gets back to his house, she does question Nick's knowledge of his wife's pregnancy. After Nick rejected the idea altogether, Rhonda continues to demonstrate to him how tightly the noose is around his neck. They use the luminol in their kitchen, test with flying colors, showing that Amy had significant blood loss there and that someone attempted to tidy things up. She presents him with a financial record indicating he's over hundreds of thousands of dollars in credit card debt, which Nick insists he never purchased. Next, Amy's life insurance is mentioned, and Nick claims he increased it since she told him to. At last, Rhonda gets a call letting her know that Amy is 6 weeks pregnant. Nick sobs and declines to speak with her without a lawyer going forward. Nick tells Margot that he wanted children, but Amy didn't when she confronts him. Amy cast aside the outcome of his fertility test, so he stored it in a box with everything else. It makes him angry with her. At last, Nick admits to Margot that perhaps he does despise Amy. Nick spends his time attempting to figure out the third clue after Margot left him. As for now, Rhonda is back at Nick's father's house with James while she attempts to figure out what had Nick been up to that evening. At last, Nick interprets the hint and proceeds straight for Margot's woodshed, the purported storage location for all of his purchases. But Rhonda, in contrast hand, finds Amy's journal inside the furnace, mildly charred. Further, on the very Amy had written on the diary's final page that the guy of her dreams and her child's father might even kill her. Amy departed the town the day she vanished. Considering how much happy she was now that she was gone, she drove her new automobile. Prior to, as she vanished, she watched programs and read novels. Amy gave Noelle fake food and became friends with her, tales of an erratic and impulsive Nick. She then collected a urine sample from Noelle, so that her medical records can reflect her pregnancy, the fully paid-up life insurance policy, the credit card debt, the extensive bleeding on the kitchen floor, the hastily performed cleanup that followed, and the incomplete entries made in the journal were all the result of Amy's actions. She exacted her revenge for Nick's treatment of her, for being sluggish and turning into someone she refused to get married and cheated on her. All that's left to do for Amy is to commit herself, leaving a trail for everyone to follow, and accuse Nick of killing her. Tanner Bolt provides legal guidance to Nick. He's an incredibly wealthy attorney who once supported Nick against Ellen Abbott, who referred to him as the patron saint of people who murder their wives. He offers to assist Nick and counsels him to persuade others to support their change. The idealized view of Amy held by the general population. Nick sets up a meeting between Tommy O'Hara and Amy's previous partner. Tommy claims Amy told him he was pushing himself on her, and he allowed her some space until Amy arrived one evening to have a rough but cooperative sleep with he. When police arrived at Tommy's door the following day, Amy's wounds were still there. Tommy felt compelled to concede to her assertions. Despite not having served time in prison, he's been out of work ever then, and he was forced to register as a predator. Using in Tommy's story, Nick imagines what would occur to him if he allows Amy to triumph, and with her track record, if he doesn't take action, she will undoubtedly get away with it. Nick talks to Tommy before going to see Desi, Amy's other ex. As she informed him, Nick seeks to learn Desi's side of the story after she was forced to file a restraining order against him. The tale. He's still loyal to Amy after all these time. Desi offers nothing to Nick without saying anything further. Amy intentionally hurt herself while she was hiding, so she may pretend to be an abused wife who is hiding, with a hammer. She remains in a little resort where she makes friends with Greta and Jeff. Amy enjoys defaming Ellen Abbott. Nick on cable television, and she revels in the idea that Missouri possesses the death sentence. In her delight, she makes an anonymous contact to the police reporting suspicious activities close Margot's woodshed. When Tanner arrives in Missouri, Nick provides him a rundown of everything that transpired. After careful thought, Tanner convinces Nick to appear on live television and come forward with his infidelity. He says that people can feel sorry for a jerk who acknowledges his mistakes and that there is currently nothing more important, rather than winning over the people to Nick's cause. Nick, though, offers an alternative notion. What if he's just had to get to one person? Regarding Amy, she is ultimately defrauded by Jeff and Greta. Amy is compelled to meet with Desi as she has no more money. Even so, even though it has been years since they started dating, Desi is still steadfastly devoted. With her. The news begins as the two start to depart. Having fun. Andy confesses to having an affair while speaking with Amy's parents during a news conference, alongside Nick. He is openly rejected by Mary Beth as her son-in-law before she declares that she and her spouse firmly feel that he played a role in Amy's disappearance. Nick's squad is in a difficult situation because Andy got there first. Tanner reaches out to the entire thing, but Nick assures you he has everything under control. At his request, they move forward with the conversation. Amy is there the night Nick's interview airs, in Desi's lakeside home, where she hawkishly observes television. Nick acknowledges previously. When he first met Amy, he was simply an average man who put up a front as someone superior, someone that Amy would want to hear these words. Therefore, that's what she would like to hear. Her gaze enlarges upon Nick, claims that because of how he has treated her, he has brought himself to the woodshed. He asks her return home, and should she do so, he pledges to be the man he said he would be. Just as in the beginning, Nick shields his chin when he tells her he loves her. As expected, Nick's interview drastically changed the public's perception. From him, they changed from detesting to adoring him. However, before they could rejoice, sirens blare in the background as Rhonda arrives to investigate Margot's shed with a search warrant. As though, although Rhonda has consistently given Nick the benefit of the doubt and has seen everything in the woodshed, was her breaking point. Tanner reassures Margot when the cops take her in. Tell Nick that their goal is to cause him trouble. Since there is no murder and no body weapon, Tanner is still convinced of their position. The tide shifts swiftly, yet when Rhonda calls Nick in for an interrogation, Amy's journal and a murder weapon discovered in Nick is accused of killing his wife in front of his fireplace. His incarceration ends quickly. Lengthy, however. Nick is out on bail and able to stay at home and get ready because of Tanner, in order to test. Nick is not deterred by the pursuing mobs at this point. He insists a stern expression on his face and challenges Amy to return home. Amy has been effective in sowing the seeds of her escape in the meantime. She's beginning to appear Desi is madly in love with her, and she looks more like the old her. The morning prior to his workday, she gives him a forceful kiss till his lips bleed, then tousles his shirt. Desi departs, carrying his after giving off a disheveled appearance for the surveillance cameras. Amy continues to drench her nightgown in wine, crimson. She crawls to the door without skipping a beat and starts to cry, staring like she's been violently attacked as everything is being captured on camera. That evening, Amy greets Desi home with a demanding and sexy demeanor and puts him to bed quickly with her. He is lost in utter joy when she encourages him to go hard. She uses a box cutter to slit Desi's throat. She spills his blood everywhere. She then effortlessly mounts him and restrains him until he is dead while wrestling. Nick wakes up on the 31st day after his wife vanished to the sound of a vehicle pulling over before his residence. When he looks it over, he sees amazing Amy in all her lustful splendor. Tearfully, she wears Desi's blood on her dress like a prize. Stumbles over to her spouse. Nick could only stare at her in shock, but as soon as she gets near then, he curses her in front of the media before she dramatically collapses into his arms. These. Amy gets checked into a hospital upon admission. For the state of her. Knowing that Nick did not murder his wife, Rhonda's skepticism has completely changed to Amy. She doesn't think her narrative is true, and neither does Nick. Amy asserts that she was abducted by Desi, who held her at his lake house and used her non-stop until she managed to get out. Rhonda tries to draw attention to the narrative's contradictions throughout, but everyone ignores her. Her, wanting to concentrate on Amy's narrative, and Amy's narrative only. To make sure Nick isn't wired, Amy forces him to take a shower with her when they get home. She insists on having the same Nick who begged her on national television to save his life. And she warns Nick that if he leaves, everyone will ruin him, even if he has promised to do so. Finally, she advises Nick to consider his choice overnight, and when he hears those words, the Nick loses energy and hope in his face. He gives in. Once again, Amy wins the title of America's sweetheart. She's being eaten alive by the media. The palm of her hands, and she couldn't be more angry at Nick, Margot, and Rhonda. Tanner departs since he is no longer in danger, and Nick attempts to persuade Rhonda to follow the situation. Even though Rhonda would really like to, it's beyond of her control. Nick finds himself compelled to let Ellen Abbott into his house 7 weeks after Amy's homecoming. Even so, she continues to act casually about all the filth she put on his name, explaining that she doesn't even offer an apology. She just follows the plot. Consistently polite, Nick keeps his cool and just heads upstairs to locate Amy. At this point, Amy stops the next shocking revelation about him. She is expecting his kid. Using Nick's sperm sample, she from the fertility center, and she is now using her pregnancy to trick him. She affirms that their child will naturally come to despise Nick if he departs now. Nick is already at his breaking point at this time. He smacks Amy's face after grabbing it, with her back to the wall. Unfazed, Amy tells him icily that he enjoyed himself only when he was making an effort to be likable to her. She foretells that he will never be content with any girl other than her. Nick, distraught, acknowledges that although he did love her, all they ever tried to dominate, hurt, and harbor resentment over one another. Amy's "the answer is easy." He hears her say, "That's marriage." Nick can't say anything. After descending the stairs, the two of them go to Ellen's interview. Nick keeps up as even after he confesses that the two of them will become parents. Grin. Still, the smile fades fast as Ellen goes to give his wife a hug and congratulations. Margot is utterly shocked when Nick informs her that he would stay with Amy for his kid. Devastated. He tries to justify his actions by saying they are for his child, but Margot charges of wishing to be with Amy. Nick is without hope, and she is inconsolable. Nick leans Amy into him and gently tousles her hair. When she turns, his hand twitches, with an eerie smile leaving him to ponder. What is she thinking? What state is she in? How have they treated one another? How will they proceed? Thank you for watching. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on the notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.